God gave us all the power. In analysing these several states of consciousness, it can readily be seen that one working on the physical or plane of instinct, not yet having separated himself in his thought world from the abundance of supply, is therefore still and consciously related with it. The majority of rich persons in the United States are still comparatively young souls, that is, souls or egos who have not had many incarnations. They are living largely upon the plane of instinct, and while they have intellect and are usually very cultured, yet the fact that they have had but few incarnations in the physical body and have therefore not had the opportunity to create very much negative energy with their intellect accounts for their not yet having set sufficient causes in motion to separate them from the abundance of supply. There are some rich persons who are old souls and who are rich because they either consciously or unconsciously live under the law of harmonious attraction most of the time. It is natural for them because they acquired the habit in former incarnations. As we go on in our growth and unfoldment, incarnation after incarnation, the majority of us set negative destructive causes in motion through our intellect, which separates us not only in consciousness but in the objective world from his abundance of supply. Many of the very poor persons we have are those egos which, having lived through the plane of instinct and developed a sense of the plane of intellect, but not a sense of their responsibilities, have accumulated such a vast amount of destructive energy as to make it necessary for them to work it out through the poverty plane of consciousness. It frequently occurs that lives which have had every whim, every wish, every desire satisfied in one incarnation become so satisfied with money from the overabundance of supply which they have had that through their very satiety they set causes in motion which in their next incarnation relates them with the direst kind of poverty. A woman once had a beautiful wrap presented to her and was going into ecstasies in her delight when another woman said, "Oh, could I only find something which would give me the joy that wrap gives to that woman?" The latter woman had had an overabundance of supply all her life, having been born into an inheritance of wealth and never having expressed a desire which money could purchase without having it satisfied. She had become satiated with wealth and did not recognize that in the energy which she had put into her statement and in the consciousness back of her words, she was setting causes in motion which, with that same state of consciousness continued and persisted in, can only have the effect some day, either in this or some future incarnation, of relating her with poverty. Now, what is the value of knowing and understanding these different planes of consciousness? Simply this, that like produces like and like attracts like on every plane of consciousness and in every rate of vibration throughout the entire universe, and that when we know the kind of causes we set in motion, the kind of energy we generate, we also know the kind of effects which will result. The object of life is to join all these states of consciousness together, make union with and live in them all harmoniously at one and at the same time. Our fixed point of contact with the world, that is the state of consciousness with which we contact it, and the things on the objective plane must necessarily be from only one of these planes of consciousness. The state of consciousness which predominates in our lives determines our vibration, and the vibration in turn determines the currents in this formless energy everywhere around us with which we relate, and the kind of atoms we draw from it to our bodies and our environment. The mental plane, or the plane of intellect, is the plane of consciousness which should predominate in the objective world, for it is only in this state of consciousness, acting through the physical body, that we are able to manifest on the objective plane. Should man's physical brain, the cerebrospinal brain through which his intellect operates, become atrophied from disuse or seriously impaired through injury, he becomes what we call an imbecile. His 5 physical senses are destroyed, his physical manifestations being only such as come from the instinct or intelligence in the physical cells of his body. On the other hand, when his solar plexus, the psychological brain through which his inspirations, intuitions and revelations are conveyed to him, becomes atrophied from disuse or in any way seriously impaired through the improper use or the ignorant and destructive control of its functions by the intellect, he becomes just as much of an imbecile as these higher planes of consciousness as he is on the physical and mental planes when his physical brain is impaired. Soul imbeciles sometimes have great knowledge and wisdom, but they always lack understanding. But no matter how atrophied their higher faculties may be, they can be developed, and the human race as a whole is developing and unfolding them rapidly, and therein lies our promise of the great future opening up before each and every one of us. Before we can manifest intelligently on the physical plane, we must develop the intellect, and through its intelligent use of all our faculties, we are then fully equipped and able to master the external world and all its conditions. We can therefore readily see how very important the mental or intellectual state of consciousness is to us. In the beginning, God gave us all power and the faculties through which to use it. He also gave us the power to use these faculties in any way our desires might lead us. God never used the law of force in our lives. He never told us that we must or must not do anything. His hand has never been laid on our lives in any way. We have been free agents all down the ages past and gone, and will continue to be free agents all along the ages yet to come, to express ourselves in accordance with whatever causes we may set in motion. No one has ever enslaved us in any way but ourselves. No one ever set a cause in motion but ourselves for which we are in any way responsible. No one ever will set a cause in motion but ourselves for which we will ever be responsible. In this material world, our responsibility begins and ends in the intellect, the mental plane of consciousness. When we use our intellect consciously or unconsciously to generate thoughts in the physical brain which in any way lower our vibrations or retard or repress our ability to express, we are using the universal energy destructively. On the other hand, when we use our intellect to generate thoughts in the physical brain which are harmonious and constructive, and so increase our vibrations and enable us to relate with more harmonious and constructive currents on the unseen side of life, we are using this universal energy constructively. The universal energy, this one substance which pervades the universe, this one life in all and through all, is neither good nor bad in itself. It simply is. It is like fire, which in itself is neither constructive nor destructive. It is the use of fire which determines its effect. When we use fire constructively, it runs the commerce of the world both on land and sea. It heats our homes and our businesses, and keeps us from freezing in the wintertime. It cooks our food and in fact becomes one of the most beneficial agencies known to man. When we permit fire to get out from under our control and run riot, it destroys our commerce both on land and sea. It destroys our homes and business places. It destroys our food, and it even destroys us, and so becomes one of the most devastating agencies known to man. But in itself, it is neither good nor bad. And so with this universal energy, we can use it to materialize an abundance of supply for ourselves, or we can use it to create poverty and lack. God does not attempt to tell us how we must use it any more than he attempts to tell us how we must use the fire. The question then is, how shall we use our intellect in order that we may build consciously for permanent success? One of the very first things to do is to displace in our consciousness every thought which will in any way relate us with this law of force. That is, all anger, hatred, worry, fear, envy, jealousy, impatience, intolerance, resentment, resistance, condemnation, criticism, etc. Everything that creates the energy which relates us with this law of force. We should displace such thoughts with those of kindness, patience, tolerance, love, not simply the personal kind of love, peace, poise, harmony, etc. These generate a constructive energy and relate us with the currents wherein are contained the atoms which will produce in material form the harmonious and constructive things that we want. When we first attempt to train our minds to displace these old negative destructive thoughts, we find it necessary to continually and persistently affirm our oneness with the thing we want, no matter how far away from its materialization objectively we may seem to be. We must fill our thought world with the thought of the thing we want, displacing again and again the thoughts which come to us of the thing we do not want, and in accordance with our persistency in displacing them, we will materialize the thing we do want sooner or later. Our work should be done without worry, fear, strain, effort, or tenseness of any kind. These old negative thoughts will come back again and again until we have formed the new habit of filling our thought world with the thoughts of the things that we want. When night comes and everything turns from light to darkness, as it has done every night since the beginning of the world, we do not fret and fuss and fume and cry about it and say, "Oh, what's the use of trying to get rid of this darkness? I have tried it again and again, but I cannot get rid of it. And there is no use of trying any more." But we just take the darkness as a matter of course and turn on the light. We should use our intellect to do the same thing in our thought world, and no matter how often thoughts of poverty, lack and failure come to us, no matter how often we look into our pockets and find them empty, no matter how poor and poverty-stricken our environment may tell us we are today, no matter how often we have failed to succeed in the past, no matter how dark the future may seem to us today, these are one and all like the darkness which comes to us every night, and we should give them no more attention than we give to the night's darkness, but turn on the light by making strong, powerful affirmations such as, "I have wealth now. I have an abundance of money now. I am wealth now. I am success now." Should we start to go down Broadway from 100th Street to the Battery and turn off Broadway at 99th Street, wander around for a while but finally return to Broadway, continuing on to 98th Street, turning off again and wandering around a while on the street, but finally returning to Broadway and continuing our journey. We could turn off Broadway at every cross street we came to, and it would not affect our ultimately reaching the end of our journey did we return to Broadway and continue our journey downtown every time we recognized that we had gotten off Broadway. Our turning into the side streets would only delay our arrival at the Battery, not prevent it. So, with these negative destructive thoughts of lack, poverty, anger, hatred, etc., which come to us from time to time, they will not prevent our ultimate success, but only delay it a little. When we learn to recognize that they create a destructive energy and we continuously and persistently displace them with constructive thoughts and affirmations, every time we recognize that they have returned to us, the length of time it will take us to arrive at our journey's end, that is, the forming of the new fixed habit in our lives of thinking constructively, will depend upon how often we get off Broadway and how long we stay off it on these side streets. That is how often we relate with the negative currents and remain in them, in their darkness, before we begin to displace them with the constructive thoughts.